Gracias, Julieta. Switch to English. Just for those of you who weren't with us for the day, we wanted to give you just a quick summary of some of the themes that have been emerging. So apologies to those who have been here today, but maybe there will be some small enlightenment. I think there's 6 themes that sort of emerged from today, from our discussion. One is we began with the assumption that the courts are often weak actors. They're constrained because by doctrines like the separation of powers, they can't intrude too much on other democratic functions. They're constrained by not impeding too much on budgetary allocations. They don't have enough information. They can be difficult to enforce their orders because they don't have police powers necessarily always at their disposal. However, at the same time, courts across the world are being called on to enforce human rights, civil and political rights, economic and social rights. And what we're seeing across the world now, and around half the countries of the world have justiciable economic and social rights. Many courts are now responding to that challenge, but in very different ways. The second thing that's come up today is on enforcement and impact. We're hearing stories of judgments that are being enforced. There is being direct impact on poverty, on discrimination. We're also hearing stories of broader impact, where beyond the decision itself and the enforcement of the decision, we see changes in policy, changes in public consciousness, new legal principles developed that are applied in other cases. We're also hearing stories of impact even when there's no enforcement, or the case is lost. Sometimes other gains are made. We're also hearing stories of negative consequences. Sometimes the decision leads to a backlash. Sometimes the decision may end up favouring the rich as opposed to the poor. A third question we've been asking is, what are the causes of enforcement? Why is there more enforcement or more impact in some cases than others? A major variable or reason that's been given is the role of social movements. When there's social mobilisation, you're likely to get strong enforcement and impact. At the same time, others have suggested that politics and the position of government is just as important. Today we've been hearing mostly stories of countries with a moderately developed level of rule of law, highly developed rule of law and democracy. Tomorrow we'll hear more stories of countries which are more transitional. And this workshop also came out of the experiences of litigators in places like Angola and China, authoritarian regimes, where people are actually getting judgments on economic and social rights, but often find it difficult to implement them. The fourth thing is the role of judges in enforcement. We've talked a little bit about access to courts, but there's been 2 main themes around the judiciary. First is what type of remedies they order. If they order a hard remedy, so the government has to do something now, and they're going to closely follow whether they do it or not, does that lead to more enforcement or not? Or if they give a more soft remedy, giving the government time, giving the government space to come up with its own options, does that allow the government more space to determine a more sustainable option, which may lead to better enforcement and impact? We're hearing different views on that topic. I'm sure we'll hear more tonight. We're also hearing different views on individual versus collective approaches. In Latin America, there's been a proliferation of the tutela approach, where you get individual remedies for access to medicines or access to schools. But many courts, but not all, are nervous about imposing broader collective remedies because they're not sure about the collective consequences. In common law systems, from the UK to US, Africa and Asia, some European countries, or mixed systems like the Philippines, you see courts willing to look at the collective consequences, make more deferential orders, but being very nervous of making about individual orders, which may impact too much on the budget, for example, because everybody could claim it. Both sets of courts are moving together a bit, but we're not seeing that happening in a large way. And lastly, we're hearing stories. So on individual collective, we've also been hearing some people think an individual order might be easy to enforce and more a collective order. Others have different opinions. And lastly, on strategies. Different types of strategies emerging. For example, social mobilisation strategies. We heard a very interesting example from the US about the campaign for better quality in education and the systematic campaigning from the media all the way through to working with politicians, to other strategies such as in India where the judges tend to lead. So that's just a little bit of the taste of some of the themes we've been talking about today, and I'll now hand over to Suzanne.